inflation is the biggest risk to money. And yet we still have a very low proportion of people in Ireland who will invest monies in EFTs or in, pooled funds or whatever it is, because what they'll say is, oh, well, how much can I lose? How much can I, this obsession with how much can I lose? But it's like, well, you're already losing money with the money sitting there.
Hi folks, and welcome to another episode of Stock Club. We are joined by a very special guest today, Emma Farrelly. Emma is the founder of Future Financial Planning. She's got over 23 years of industry experience, a qualified financial advisor, a retirement planning advisor, a pension trustee practitioner, and a sustainable investment advisor. Coming on the show today, she's here to discuss all things personal finance, financial and retirement planning, as well as the Irish investing landscape. Emma, welcome to Stock Club.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Yeah.
Privileged to be here. Thanks so much.
No bother. You got a bit of an alphabet soup coming after your name there. QFA, RPA, PTP, SIA.
I often wonder, who actually pays attention to all those letters, because I don't think any of my clients do. It's just the industry. We're obsessed with putting letters after our names. It's probably a bit of an ego thing, but it actually matters to nobody, probably for ourselves.
I know. I'm a part of it myself with my QFA, so I've seen how the sausage is made, unfortunately. But let's jump in. So, and I think it's funny. We always talk about like retirement planning and investments and everything else. And if you go into a financial planner, the first thing they'll tell you about is your own personal financing and budgeting and all the rest. So, if you were to have, say, a personal finance checklist, what are the most important things people can do when it comes to building on their financial future?
Okay, so I suppose if somebody comes in or someone is looking to have a meeting with me, what I'll like, ideally, if someone is young enough, so maybe late 20s, early 30s, trying to get a handle on their finances, there's a couple of things that I would say, well, look, these are the things that really you should be doing. There's a little bit of preaching involved in it, but I mean, the first thing would be, know your money, know where it's going. So have a budget. It can be a very simple Excel spreadsheet, and just put in your incomings, your outgoings, but really look at what you have both coming in and also what you've got paying out. You've got, so like I'd always say as well, like always try and build an emergency fund, so you have something there. Now, when I say emergency fund, probably kind of maybe 3-4 months wages or salary, the equivalent of that, in a current account somewhere, that if you need access to cash, for whatever, your car breaks down, like a practical reason or whatever, that you've got something there. Then I suppose after that, then you're looking at, try and avoid kind of high interest loans and credit, I suppose, is for want of a better word. You have a lot of stuff going around at the moment, where you can buy a lot, like especially for younger people, and I'm seeing it more and more in places where you can buy on credit. You can buy so much stuff now on credit. So between that and credit cards, like try and, as much as possible, try and not get into that space. And if you do, get into a good habit of paying it off. You do want to, I suppose, as you go along, you do want to build some type of credit, but you want to do it, or like, what should I say, a credit, like history,
equivalent to your credit score from the US, yeah.
Exactly. So you got to do something. And look, we can't go through life without borrowing. Like, I certainly haven't. So, but it's just to do it and try and not let it get out of control. The other thing is like, building good habits. So, when you get into your first job, to have a look and say, okay, well, look, how do I work with this money? I always say to people, ideally, you should have three types of plans in place: a short-term plan, a medium-term, and a long-term plan from a savings perspective. So your short-term is like your emergency fund that we spoke about. Your medium-term then is, for things that may come in the future. So if you're looking to save for a deposit, or you've got kids and you want to save for education, that sort of stuff. And then your longer term is your pension, right, or your retirement plan, should I say. And like, also it's really, I think a lot of it is about, one, having a bit of a buffer, right? Two, not being too build we hear all the time this, build wealth, and it all sounds great, right? Another very important part of building wealth and stuff like that is also protecting it. So just, being careful, so not overexposing yourself as well. So if someone wants to build a retirement plan, or medium term savings plan, whatever the case may be, through all of that, you've got to have your income. So your income is your biggest, I suppose, what's the word I could use? I mean, your income is your biggest asset, without a shadow of a doubt. So there is an element around, look, putting certain things in place, that if that income falls one day, or something happens, could be illness, could be redundancy, could be death. Well, if it's death, I suppose it's not your problem necessarily, but the others around you. So an element of making sure that that is protected as well throughout the journey. So you start off, and you build the wealth, but also throughout that lifespan, or not even the wealth, but you put a plan in place. You protect that plan as you go along. Okay. And I suppose, like, another big one I would say to people as well, very important: have a will in place. It's like estate planning. Like, a lot of these very morbid, boring things are some of the most important things that you can do. For example, putting a will in place, if you've, even, regardless of if whether you're single, whether you're married, got kids, obviously in certain circumstances it's more important. But because the problems that can occur if you don't have a will in place. And also estate planning. Again, estate planning is more, I suppose, it becomes more important, maybe the more wealth people generate, whatever, over the years. But at the same time, it is an important. So it kind of starts from the basic, but builds up. So I mean, if someone comes into me and we're having a meeting, we don't sit down and go through all of this, because that would just be, chaotic. We start. So like, I could have someone coming into me who's in their 20s. I could have someone coming into me who's in their 50s. So they're very different points of their financial journey. And their needs and their wants will be very different. But in a lot of cases, that I will have the same kind of checklist for them. Have you got A, B, C, D? Have you got all of these things? And if they haven't, then we look at kind of putting something in place, or get them thinking around getting that into place.
Okay, that's good stuff. You mentioned two different investing journeys, we'll say. And I guess, say, if for someone now listening to this who maybe has just come out of college, they're in their first graduate job, first kind of proper salary job, what advice would you give them in terms of thinking about, I say, the medium term plans and the long term plans? You mentioned this. So the short term we've kind of covered, but say in terms of their investments, putting their money to work.
So, well, there's two parts to that, right? So someone goes in and starts a job. The first thing I would recommend, and I do this all the time, is I will say to them, if there's a pension scheme in that employment, get into it straight away. If there isn't one, get one set up for yourself. Like, legislation now, kind of, which has been around for over 20 years, means that all companies in Ireland have had to, since 2003, offer availability of some type of pension vehicle to their staff. They don't have to pay into it, but they have to offer the facility, have it taken through payroll. So that is open, and should be open to everybody who starts in a job, maybe 20s, or whatever age it is. So immediately you're getting on a good saving path. you're getting into a good saving habit, and you're also getting into, good tax benefits, and the ability to get your tax relief and on the contributions, and also your tax relief on your growth there. The other thing I would say to them is, again, similar, is set up some type of ongoing savings plan. So, go through your budget, go through your incomings and outgoings and all the rest, and look and say, okay, well, look, how much, can I afford to put away, and get into that habit of putting money aside every month.
And importantly,
again,
putting it away at the start of the month when the paycheck comes in, instead of at the end when
yes.
it's the money that's left.
Yes, and have it as a standing order, as a direct debit. Don't say, oh, I'll throw 50 quid into the credit union. Or like, actually put yourself under pressure and do it and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It's going to go in, and that can be a trading account. It can be the credit union. It can be whatever that individual wants. What I'm starting to find is it's very interesting. A lot of the younger people, I've 4 kids myself, and my youngest are 17-year-old boys. And they're one of them the other day was saying to me, I'm just studying day trading now. So I'm like, he's like, how can I make money, and how can I make it fast without really having to work? And I was like, I just said to him, that doesn't exist. You're actually wasting your time. You've got to do stuff on a kind of a longer term thing. If you want to do that, you might as well go to the betting shop and just go and gamble your money. So but yeah, they're the 2 things I would say. It's really about making the commitment to yourself and getting into a habit. Get the direct debit set up, whatever the case may be, and just have the money going out. It's great if people can have, for the likes of pension stuff, if it can go out prior to it getting paid into your bank account. If it's done at source, it is so much easier, because, at the end of the day, then you get your bottom line, and that's what you live off. But yeah, it's all about habit making.
Yeah. And then say in a similar position, but someone is in their late 30s, early 40s, but they finally got a handle on their finances and they want to start. And obviously they're starting from a much different position. Would you give them similar advice, or is there anything specific for that cohort?
In a situation like that, I would normally look at, I would always recommend first, especially someone that's kind of, let's say they're in their house and they've got their, they don't necessarily need money, or a large amount of money, within a kind of 5 to 10 year period, or even kind of 1 to 10 year period. Make sure that they maxed out what they can do on pension first. Okay, from a tax perspective, that absolutely makes sense, and also depending on what they have done previously. After that, then it would be, when I meet people like at that kind of age, it tends to be, looking at they might have children, putting money away for education, and maybe being able to give it a bit of a dig out if they need money. Because what I have found is, if people are saving for themselves for something, kind of down the road as such, that tends to fall into the pension piece, because they can potentially access benefits and stuff from 60. So that tends to be kind of cornered off. But it might be that, when they're 50, or early 50s, that they have to put their kids through college, or someone's getting married, or you know what I mean, there's a big life event there that they'd like to have some money to put aside. Or I speak to people and they're like, I'd like to buy a place abroad, or I'd like to do something nice with my money because I've worked so hard for it. But a big one is the education is a really big one, because certainly in Ireland, it is expensive, and it is only getting more expensive. It looks like, the kind of grant that we were given for college, the reduction of €1,000 is going back up, from September. So now they haven't, or they haven't clarified that, but that looks like the way it's going. So all of a sudden, it's all becoming more expensive. People having to put their kids up and all that sort of stuff. And that's what I see, because if you want to have a comfortable life, you've got to you have to put a plan in place. It just doesn't happen if you don't. It doesn't happen by magic unless you're really lucky or you win the lotto or something like that happens, which would be great as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's talk in more broader strokes here about Ireland as a whole, because we've done the studies. We're an amazing country of savers, but an awful lot of that money is sitting in low yield savings accounts or current accounts even. So why is there such an aversion to investing in this country? Why do Irish people fear risk, at
So
least financially?
I don't. Yeah, I don't know if it's that they fear risk. What I have seen over the years is they do. Irish people fear risk, but they see it sometimes can see it very differently to how it actually is. So if you go back, you know, 20 years, right? Everyone wanted to buy property. Everyone thought like this is, bricks and mortar, this is what we wanted, like it can't fail, I can touch, I can feel my investment, and this is what I want, okay? Um and it was that, or the money was sitting in the bank, okay? And at that time, you're probably getting better interest rates as well. But we went through a period where it was almost like, oh, everything that people, with regards to property that you touch will turn to gold, and everybody can be millionaires. And when I used to have conversations with people during these periods of time, it was very interesting because they wouldn't invest in an equity based fund, but they'd buy a property. And you'd spend your time trying to explain to them, like, you do understand that a property is a liquid, a property is like one asset class in one geographical area. Like, the risk that you're taking is so large, but they just didn't see it because they said, well, no, it's bricks and mortar, and it'll be mine, and I can see it and I can touch it. And there's still an element of that to this day. But what has happened now is everybody is leaving money sitting in the bank. Oh, I want to be able to see my money. I want to be able to go online and see that I have got X, Y, and Z in the bank, and no one's going to take it from me. It's not going to fall in value. And that is the actual mentality. But in reality, it's falling in value all the time because it's been eroded by inflation. Um, I don't know whether it's that sentiment isn't pushed out enough, or whether people don't understand because, like, inflation is the biggest risk to money, and yet we still have a very low proportion of people in Ireland who will invest monies in EFTs or in, pooled funds or whatever it is, because what they'll say is, oh well, how much can I lose? How much can I? This obsession with how much can I lose? But it's like, well, you're already losing money with the money sitting there. So Ireland is a funny place. Also, you have to remember, we're a very young, rich country.
100%.
So
We've talked about
and
this
if I
before. Go back to
like
my parents'
it's
generation, and the thought of
yeah,
equities is nuts.
it's just like my own father, who would have he would have invested, and I would have, I would have thought of him as a very astute businessman for his time. And but like, at that time, anyone who was in shares, they were really in bank shares. They were, there was, and again, safe as houses, nothing can go
Mm.
wrong. I think certainly my generation are the ones who felt, what can go wrong there. But again, I think in a period of, let's say, probably 60 years, Ireland has gone through this huge transformation. And so you see a lot of people in their 70s and 80s who hold a huge amount of money and wealth. And then you find a lot of people in their 40s and 50s really struggling. And I think it's a fear thing. It's very interesting. It's like the younger people in their 40s and 50s are looking at the older people and saying, well, look, how do they make their money? They make their money with their properties and, money in the bank, whatever it is. So, like, why can't we do that?
Yeah.
But,
And it's
you
funny
can't.
as well that that specific generation would have gone through the banks but also the
Yeah.
Aircom shares as well, which were both
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
government backed kind of,
Schemes.
con jobs nearly in a
Yeah.
certain sense. So they've been burned quite heavily twice in what was literally being advertised to them by their own government as kind of safe as houses. So there has to be a
And also,
distrust to the system as a whole there.
yeah. And also, most of them, not all of them, but a lot of them would have come from quite, poor backgrounds. There wouldn't have been wealth there. I think we've only really started to see that in the kind of probably from the 90s onwards. And that is not that long ago. So, like if you look at children now and even kids in their 20s, and they see an extremely different Ireland to what even I would have seen when I was growing up in the 90s. And I would hope, and I really would, that view around risk and return and all that, it's starting to change, that, as a country, we're starting to see, look, we do have to do something to try and make the money we have work harder. Now look, it doesn't help with the exit tax and the deemed disposal and all that sort of stuff, but that hopefully is going to will somewhat wash itself out over the coming years. But that definitely doesn't help either.
No, and it's funny. It's kind of a bogey term around here in this podcast. We have to mention it about once a month. But there are incredibly prohibitive laws to investing,
Yeah,
especially passive investing in Ireland. So we have
yeah,
deemed disposal law. If you're listening to this podcast and you don't know what it is, I'm very surprised. But just to clarify, essentially every 8 years, if you own a foreign-based ETF, the government will tax you as if you have sold it, whether you have or not. So very prohibitive in terms of long-term investing and that passive way that so many people are using to build proper
yeah,
generational wealth in other countries. And then
yeah,
on top of that, the exit tax is even greater than an individual stock. So it's 41% instead of 33%. Now, I'm glad you brought it up because there does seem to be a tide turning in terms of regulation here, and at least what the government is saying. So Pascal Donoghue has said some positive
mm,
comments, Chambers before him. There's a study done. They're trying to make Irish people, especially the retail investing side of things, a lot more simpler for people. So what are your budget 2026 is kind of going to be the first evidence of what they see putting in action. Do you foresee people
yeah.
being able to invest in foreign based ETFs quite comfortably in the years ahead, or do you think it's going to be a while before it really comes in?
My gut would say that I feel it is going to be. I would love to say that, yeah, it's going to happen in the next year or so. The fear is, I think, with what's going on with auto-enrollment being brought in, I fear that they will push this down the line a little bit because they're so under pressure to get the auto-enrollment. It has been lobbied very heavily by the industry. And I genuinely think it would make a big difference, to the people's ability to invest and their attitude towards investing. Um, you know, there's a lot of noise around it being brought in 2026, but it's like anything. Until it's here, you can't believe that it's going to happen, and that has happened for years, and many different areas that we've looked at, and changes legislation that we've looked for. Um, do they have the appetite to just go through with the legislation? Um, yeah, I've it's a very interesting one. I have you know the government and finance and the I suppose the real economics with regards to people's wealth and how they can grow it and what they can do with it. Personally, I don't know whether the government would have a huge appetite for that.
Yeah,
Um, I don't know why. I have never seen that appetite. So maybe that's why.
but there's perception issues, I suppose, and it's counterintuitive completely because some of it is feeding into the property crisis, where you have property as the only kind of investment outlet for a lot of people, and then on top of that, in terms of general, wealth creation, you're giving people this outlet. Like, there's so many famous stories. I think it's in Morgan Housel's Psychology of Money, which is a brilliant book. But he
Yeah.
mentions, is it the janitor that is working in
Yeah.
the university who donated $8 million that he just built up. I
Yeah.
think he found 5 or 6 stocks, and through
Yeah.
a completely normal salary and a completely like frugal way of living, became a multi millionaire with nothing
Yeah.
exceptional done. And I just feel that isn't available in Ireland, at least in terms of financial literacy, in terms of how we tax people's investments, in terms of a culture here. And you see that, like, as in, I always bring this up, but the tax allowance on investments is €1,270, and that's the exchange rate from 1,000 punt back before the euro. That's how long that's been
Like,
there, and just hasn't been updated to match anything else
yeah.
that the country is doing in terms of this. So
Yeah.
yeah, look, there's a lot of talk, and I think I'm with you in the terms of I'll believe it when I see it. But I really do
Yeah.
hope
It's
they bring Ireland into the 21st century when it comes to this, because in terms of access to what we have, trading apps and all the rest, like, as in, it's never been easier to invest, and yet we're still dealing with these kind of archaic tax laws, which were brought in for poor reasons anyways, brought in for reasons that didn't really understand the nature of the investments.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. I think there's a lack of understanding, and that's probably one of the biggest, one of the biggest issues. And like, yes, they'll say like, oh, well, you don't want to complicate things, and you don't like, it's like anything, things can be as complex or as simple as you want them to be. Um, so it's not a case of, oh, well, if this is lifted, then everyone's going to start trading, Bitcoin, crypto, that's not the case. Like, people will still make informed decisions, but they'll also be offered options that are out there. I mean, we can, like, the thing about it is, like, if you look at the likes of, different funds out there and equities and stuff like that, like, we have huge amount of historical data which shows how well they perform, and how like, majority of pension funds in Ireland are built on equity funds, you know and you see how the growth rates they get, all that sort of stuff. And so there's no reason why it's almost like, oh, we can do it for this, but we can't do it for this. And say, well, why not? If at the end of the day, it's the same process, it's the same thing you're doing. But I don't know. It's a bit of a mystery, to be honest. And I unfortunately am of the belief that kind of I believe when I see it.
Yeah. Hi, folks. We are just 3 weeks away from Investicon on the 21st of August in the Irish Stock Exchange here in Dublin. It is going to be an amazing day. We're going to have some amazing speakers, and we've specifically requested each speaker bring 3 investing insights, which you as a guest can act on. So I have to say, I'm really excited to hear all of the speakers, whether it be from the world of whiskey, from the world of stock investing, from the world of financial management. Throughout the day, you're going to get an amazing insight into what these people are, how they view the market, the stocks they're looking at, what investments they're looking at. So it's going to be an amazing day, 21st of August. There are still a few tickets left. You can act now. And just as a little cherry on top, we've reminded we're still running the Horizon offer. So if you sign up to Horizon, you will get a free Investicon ticket. So write in, find us on Investicon. The link will be in the bio. And yeah, it's going to be a great day, 21st of August in Dublin here in the Irish Stock Exchange. I think the fact that the vast majority of TDs are landlords as well might be a small
Well,
reason. But
yeah,
let's move on before we turn this into a political podcast. You talked about auto-enrolment there. So that's coming in at the start of
yeah,
2026. Could you expand on that for
yeah.
maybe people who might have heard about it but don't really fully grasp what the meaning of it is?
Yeah, so basically, auto enrollment will come into legislation from the 1st of January 2026. what it's going to do is it's probably going to bring around 800,000 into or I suppose allow up to 800,000 people access to some form of pension scheme, okay, based on being under the age of 60, over the age of 23, and earning over 20,000 a year. Okay, so they're your criteria that it kind of starts off with. Now, you have an opt-in option if you want to go into it and you're over 60, or you're under the age of 23, or you're earning less than 20,000. But essentially, if you're within that bracket and you don't have a payment into a pension provider going through your payroll, you will be pulled into what's called this auto-enrolment. Okay, so I'll tell you a very kind of basic structure on how the whole thing works. It's the it's starting at 1.5% contribution from the employee, and the employer must match that 1.5%. Okay, and that's going to rise to 6% over the next 10 years. So by 2036, that 1.5% will become 6%. 6% from employer and 6% from the employee. And then you have what the government do is they make what's called a top up into it. Okay, I think they were essentially trying to make it sound a little like, I don't know if you remember the SSIAs back in the early 2000s, where if you saved, the government gave you a top up of 25%, and it was fantastic. They were trying to encourage everybody to save. So this is similar, but not similar when it comes to the pension landscape. So you basically, what's going to happen is for example, if someone is in a personal pension and not paying in through their salary, they're also going to be pulled in under this measure. And you're going to have the top up that the government make is going to be, so at the moment we have a 20% tax relief and a 40% tax relief, okay, depending. So if you earn over 44,000 as a single person, you go up onto the 40% tax bracket, income tax, and that's the tax relief you will receive on pension payments if you're earning over that amount. So the government contribution is going to be what they said by 30%. Okay, so it's going to be in between. So what it means is there'll be a benefit realistically for someone who is on the 20% tax bracket, because they will now, instead of getting 20% relief, get 30. But someone that is on a higher earner will be disadvantaged, okay, because they now will get less tax relief, which obviously will be a problem. It'll work the same way in the sense that your pension fund will grow tax-free, but it will be much more restrictive. So it's going to be run by the Department of Social Protection. Seemingly, this is the idea, is that the Department of Social Protection and Revenue will work together. But the scheme will be run through the Department of Social Protection. You will have no access to early benefits. So 65 will be the earliest you'll be able to access any of your benefits. You'll only be able to put in what is allowed. So either the 1.5%, or that'll go up over 6 years, or sorry, over 10 years. You can't put in what's called additional voluntary contributions. So the individual can't put in any extra money. That obviously is going to be an issue. And then from an investment point of view, there's really not going to be any choice around, investing in, or if there is, it'll be extremely limited. It looks like there'll be one investment manager, and it probably will be Irish Life, and we don't know for sure yet, but they are the biggest in the country, so that's probably who the government will use. And then you also are going to have options to opt out, and that's after 6 months. But then after 2 years, you're going to be automatically opted back in and auto-enrolled back in. So it's going to be quite complex. And for it will work, I think, very well for a certain criteria of people, and for people who wouldn't, let's say, not necessarily have any access to pension, and
So
it'll bring them in and it'll give them an opportunity.
that's what it seems to me. It's going after a very specific cohort and serving them specifically. And for maybe a lot of
Yeah,
listeners who are already contributing to a pension, they can kind of skip this 5 minute part. But there's a
absolutely.
very important aspect of bringing people in, almost whether they like it or not, into some form
Yeah.
of long term planning.
Yeah, and at the moment, so we look to as we normally do. Look to the UK. They did it a number of years ago. It hasn't. They're now, I think, looking at it's in the process of kind of changing it, because it really hasn't worked. There's very mixed feelings here. I mean, I know from my own perspective, and from my own clients, my own pension clients, like, one of the really important pieces around building a pot of money and a fund, is around the advice and the funds, and all of that type of thing. The advice piece is really important, and that is going to be totally stripped out of it. So there will be no advice, and it will literally be your money goes in. There will be some type of portal there. You can go on and have a look. But it's going to be very basic to start off with anyway. It will be very basic. Maybe it'll progress as the years go on. But as a start, I think that the conversation I'm having with a lot of companies and a lot of my own clients is, look, if you've got a scheme set up already, open it up and just let everybody into it. You can change the rules slightly and bring in people at a lower level, but it is from a company's perspective, giving somebody an auto enrollment access to a pension is quite poor and quite very low level. So it's not really a benefit.
Okay. Okay. But it is good to cover and to know, to get more information on this, because this is the thing as well. I reading about this. The Bank of Ireland survey revealed that 49% of participants in Ireland rated their investment knowledge as poor. Only 28% of people rated it positively. And like, this isn't really from a lack of information available. I think there's so much now online. The access to experts across the world when it comes to investing is there. And I'm just looking at, like, is this a cultural thing? Is it the fact that there aren't enough Irish people specifically talking about it? So I'd love, from your perspective, where would you send people if they want to start learning about investing? This can range from anything from the most basic ABCs to content you enjoy yourself, books, podcasts,
Yeah,
videos, whichever. Just a place where, because I'm kind of shocked at how financially illiterate we are as a country, and I just think there needs to be a bit more emphasis on self teaching as well.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I suppose one of the Psychology of Money, that book by Morgan Housel, that's a brilliant book. Like, absolutely. Like, I have kind of sent that recommendation to many different people of all different ages, and I'm like, just listen to this. It is a great book. The I suppose the other thing is, and this is something that I would feel quite passionately about, and I spoke to a colleague of mine in the industry yesterday as well, and we were talking about it. Like, financial literacy, like, it needs to start much earlier than
Mm,
it does. So
absolutely.
in Ireland, you have to be a self-starter. So you have to make the first move. You have to decide, we should be teaching this in schools. I mean, they do economics, they do business studies, all that sort of stuff, but that covers everything at an extremely high kind of macro level. Whereas what we should be learning is, what do we do with money? How do we manage our money? How do we look after it? And if you start to learn something from a younger age, you start to get more of an interest in it, and then that kind of snowballs. I mean, look, the likes of YouTube, there's some brilliant stuff on YouTube. Like, you can go on to some of the life companies' websites, and there's a lot of some good bits and pieces there. Like, a lot of it is very similar. Um, there's there's a bit of a, I think because of the 07, 08, the financial crash, along with the property crash, there is a real, there is definitely still a fear in this country about investing.
Yeah.
And I think
A
that's one of the
distrust
things that
nearly.
we have to overcome. Yeah, there's definitely this mistrust. Like the best thing you can do for yourself is to, look up an advisor online, speak to somebody, like have a conversation with somebody, like just having a conversation or looking for information or whatever the case may be. You're not going to be pushed into something. What you're going to do is educate yourself. And then I would say when you've got education, then you'll make a better decision. And be that the right decision for you. Nobody's going to make you go left or right. But we need more. We really do need more out there. And I would love to see the schools
Yeah,
do more.
absolutely.
Um,
And then the universities as
I
well,
think
do
that's
you
where it
know?
starts.
And the
Yeah,
schools is an obvious
yeah,
place to go, but even people coming out of university don't have a clue either.
no,
Yeah.
revenue, someone going into a first job, just stuff that, shouldn't be as difficult as it is. People, the fear that they have, I always encourage people. I'm like, if you've got a question, pick up the phone and ring revenue, talk to them. They're incredibly helpful. People are afraid of their life, but I'm like, no, ask the questions. It's important to ask the questions. And you can, there's so many places you can go and look and have a look at different, podcast. I love podcasts myself. I find I mean your own, I love. I find it's incredibly interesting. I love to go for a walk and listen to them, and just, you're learning stuff, but you're not learning it under pressure.
Mm.
You're doing it at your own pace. We don't necessarily have to study all this stuff. We can just take it in and listen to experts. And also, I think it's very important is to listen to experts. Don't feel like, as we call, like, bar stool conversations, the barman telling you what you should do with your money, or somebody telling you, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. A little bit of information can also be very dangerous.
Yes.
So if you want to find something out, go to the experts. You know, don't necessarily go to Google. Like if you've got a health problem, don't go to Google.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to finish up on quite an important topic and something you've written about before, and that's the gender pension gap. So this is a really unfortunate issue that's facing a lot of women, where essentially there's about a 30% gap on average when it comes to retirement
Yeah,
between
like
men and women.
35%.
35%, even worse. So
Yeah.
you've written about this before, and I just love, because again, it all feeds into similar issues of financial literacy and confidence and education and all the rest, but unfortunately affects women a lot more. I'd love for you to expand on the piece you wrote in the Business Post, and kind of just, if there are many women listening to this that feel they need to get more involved and take more control of their own financial future, to speak directly to them, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, like a lot of this came, I suppose, from my own experience, and it's kind of a two-prong approach, from working in the industry, but also working in the industry as a mother and as a person who had to take time out for, for maternity leave, and, taking time out with the kids and stuff like that. And what I noticed, let's say, from a working perspective, so when I was speaking to clients, the amount of women that just didn't have a hold of their finances, really, and pension, and, kind of almost like they'd given up and said, oh well, like, sure, I was only working part-time, or I was off this amount of time, and, not realizing what that would make from a reduction in their own pension. um Also conversations about, oh well, sure, my husband has a pension. Like if I had a penny for every time I heard that from someone, oh sure, I don't need one, my husband has a really good pension. Like that hugely plays into the pension gap. This belief that if one person in a home has a pension, that then you're sorted. Pension is done based on an individual. It's done on your own taxes. You build up your own fund, all that sort of stuff. And I think just by our very nature, because women tend to be the caregivers, they're the ones having the children, taking time out. They don't, in a lot of cases, they're not giving themselves the opportunity to really build what they should be building for their future. I never really had that issue when I was, talking to men about this. It was like, oh yeah, they had it all under control. They knew what they were doing. They didn't have breaks in service and stuff like that. And you see, the problem is, even when you do have breaks in service, so even, for example, if we bring it back to the auto-enrolment, that's not going to take into consideration these women who might have to take a year off. Or so my advice this is my advice to everybody, but especially to women, is take control of your own finances. Like, look at it from your own individual perspective. None of us know what's around the corner. I mean, we don't know whether or not, if so there could be a separation, there could be financially things can happen down the road. And if you don't have the control over it, know what's what, and build your own independent pot, you could potentially be left exposed. And that's what, I would like to try and, I suppose, reduce the amount of people that are out there that can potentially be exposed. And I don't want to sound like a feminist when I'm saying this, but it is the reality of what is out there, and what I see, is because of the fact that a lot of women kind of put their career on the back foot, or on the back burner while going through having kids and bringing them up, that they don't realize the gap and what the difference that's going to make. And it's not to say that can't be fixed. Of course it can be. You just got to look at, okay, well, look, what have I got to do now to try and bridge this gap, and what needs to be done going forward. But you've got to take control and responsibility in order for that to happen.
Okay. Very important issue there to be discussed. Emma, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you very much for joining us at Stock Club. For anyone who wants to find Emma, it's futurefinancialplanning.ie. Is that correct?
It is indeed. Yes, yes, it is indeed. So, yeah, absolutely. Anyone has any questions or queries, feel free to reach out to me. And thank you so much for having me on. I really, really enjoyed chatting.
No, it was a pleasure. It's great to get an Irish voice on every now and then as well. So, Emma, thank you for joining me, and thank you everyone for listening in. We will talk to you next week.